Bentar Pak, saya pakai headset Pak.
Ya,
Oke,
ya Pak Wahab.
oke. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Now, we would like to present for our topic discussions under the title of Expose Factor Research. Um, we are from the groups and the members of the groups. I'm Wahab Syahrul Alim, and then my friends Bapak Saiful Islam, and then Ibunda Kristantia Yuwanita. Well, next one. Okay, let we start from the definitions of the expose factor itself. According to Ariatotle, 2019, expose factor is a study conducted to examine the events. So it would like to examine for the events that occurred and then trace back to find out the factors that can cause these events. And it is called retrospective. Uh, it usual called by retrospective. And then according to Watson's ex post facto, I am to find the cause of the behavior change with the participatory comparative study of behavior that arises at the present times and behavior that doesn't arise from an event after the independent variable occurs. For the example, we will test the hypothesis that divorce can lead to children's behavior deficiencies. Then another definitions, it started from Kerlinger, 1993, defines ex post facto research as empirical finding that are carried out systematically. Researchers do not control for the independent variables because their manifestations have already occurred. And then this we often call as non-manipulative. For example, a researcher want to know the effect of smoking on the ability to absorb oxygen in the blood. Ex post factor research is a research to explain or to find the variables in the research interconnected or influential, but also why the symptoms. Next, um, and then Aristotle also stated that manipulated variable is called the independent variable or the experimental treatment. Independent variable is a variable that is antecedent to the dependent variable. Various for dependent variable is a variable that is a consequence of a dependence on an antecedent or independent variable. Okay, next, let me start from when we are again for the data, primarily in the form of the numbers or the words. When we are able to answer for this, so the answer is the number, so it will be correlated to the quantitative. Then we should rise for the next questions. Does the register have the control over an independent variables? When it is yes, so it including to experimental. But when it is not the answer, so it's include to non-experimental. Because we talk about the ex post facto, so the answer is no. So when the answer is no, it's include to non-experimental. The next questions that should answered by the researchers is the study investigating how the variable change together. When it is not, so it's not used to survey. But when it is yes, so it rise for the next questions. Is the directions and the strengths of the relationship of the two or more variables among the same subjects or pair subjects studied? So when it is no, so it's include to ex post facto. Ex post facto, as the definitions, it's a measure for what's that? We call perbandingan. Perbandingan. Okay, next. Type of ex post facto. There are some of the types of the ex post facto. The first is correlational studies that examines the strengths and the directions of the relationship between two or more variables. So it examines the strengths, the relationships. Next, causal research, or we can call as correlation research, is a study that involves the acts of the collecting data in order to determine whether there is a relationship and the level of relationships between two or more variables. That's for the second type of the ex post factor. Then next, casual comparative research. The last type of the ex post facto casual comparative research is a basic casual comparative approach that involves the researcher beginning by identifying the effects of one variable on another, and then trying to find possible causal variables. Those are the types of the ex post facto. In comparative causal research, the researcher seeks to examine the research questions. What is the effects of X, for instance? For example, what is the effect if a child without attending kindergarten goes directly to elementary schools? So, and then what happens if freshmen from high school, without going through matriculation lectures, immediately take engineering courses? Yeah. So those are for the examples. For the characteristic of the ex post facto, let me give to Ibunda Kristantia Yuanita. The time and network is yours.
Oke, thank you Pak Wahab. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for the chance for me to continue present our PPT. This is about characteristics of ex post facto. The first, that data is collected after all events have occurred. Second, the dependent variable is determined first, then traced back to find the cause, relationship, and meaning. The third, descriptive research, which explains its finding as observed. The fourth, correlational research, tries to find the causal relationship of the phenomenon under study. And the last, ex post facto and experimental research are based on the logic used, and the goals to be achieved are the same, namely determining empirical validity. For example, if X, then Y. The difference with experiments in ex post facto, there is no direct control of independent variables. Another characteristics of ex post facto is this research is conducted if in some cases experimental research cannot be carried out. These are if it is impossible to select, control, and manipulate the factors necessary to examine the cause-effect relationship directly. And if control of all variables is unrealistic and artificial. For example, difficulty in preventing normal interactions with other influencing variables. And if laboratory control for some purposes is not practical, both in terms of cost and ethics. According to Sukardi, these are ex post facto research steps. The first, identify a significant problem to be solved through the ex post facto method. Number two, limit and formulate the problem clearly. Three, determine the objective and benefits of research. The fourth, conduct a literature study related to the research. The fifth, determine the framework, research questions, and determine the research hypothesis. The sixth, design the research method to be used, including determining the population, sample, sampling techniques, determining data collection instruments, and analyzing data. The seven, collect, organize, and analyze data using relevant statistical techniques. And the last, make a research report, including making conclusion. Ex post facto research steps, it starts from problem formulations. The problem formulation must contain the cause for the dependent variable to appear. Second step, this is about hypothesis. Once the problem is formulated, the researcher must be able to identify a counterpoint or alternative that might explain the relationship between the independent and dependent variables. The third, data grouping. Determining the group of subjects to be divided. First, the group chosen must have these characteristics or different levels. The steps number 4 is data collections. Only the necessary data is collected, both with regard to the dependent variable and with regard to factors that allow counter hypotheses to emerge. Since this research investigates phenomena that have already occurred, often the necessary data is already available, so the researcher only needs to select the appropriate sources. The next steps, data analysis. The data analysis technique used similar to those used in differential and experimental research. The dependent variable is conducted between groups of subjects on the basis of the factor of interest. This can be done with t-tests, independent or ANOVA analysis techniques. And the last step is interpretations of result. Cause and effect statements in this study need to be done carefully. For example, the effect of learning motivation on learning achievement based on student gender. This is the examples of research. I think that's all for me. From me, Pak Wahab. It can continue to next to Pak Saiful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bunda Kristantia Yuanita. And then next, for the application to difference data measurements, and another subtopics would like to deliver by Bapak Saiful Islam. Time and network is yours.
Thank you, Pak Wahab. Now I'd like to explain about application to a different data measurement. Yeah, because as we know, the types of data include interval, ratio, yeah, and so on. And exposed factor research, also called causal and comparative. So here we focus on the comparative one. So for the data measurement, as Mrs. Kristanti explained before, so we have the test, one-way analysis of variance, ANOVA, two-way ANOVA, multivariate analysis of variance, MANOVA, and analysis of covariance, ANCOVA. So there are some um, techniques, yeah, to analyze data from the exposed factor. That's for interval and history data. And for nominal and ordinal data, we have for focus on the comparative one, we have chi-square test of goodness of fit, one sample t-test, Mann-Whitney U, and Purscal-Wallis. Yeah. Um, for the further explanation, we'll discuss more about this one. And now, related to Ms. Kristanti explained before, related to research step. So we have to consider some issues here. So number one, the relationship analysis can be done by looking at the average score of the result of measurement of learning motivation X with the average score of the result of measurement of Y learning achievement. So the X here means learning motivation and Y is achievement. So furthermore, researchers can analyze the relationship between the average score of the result measuring male student learning motivation with the average score of the result measuring male student learning achievement. So X and Y. The same is also true for female students, namely the relationship between X2 and Y2. Yeah. And in addition, researchers can also compare the learning motivation of male and female students, namely the relationship between X2 and Y2, and the difference in learning achievement between male and female students. Yeah. As you know, ex post facto, the aim of ex post facto is to know the difference between variables. Yeah. Another example. Yeah. A researcher intend to conduct study determine the effect of using classical music, Mozart, on memorization skills in children. Yeah. So the title might be the effect of using classical music on children memorizing skill at bunga bangsa in Negara, for example. So the hypothesis, there is an effect. Yeah. There is an effect of using classical music on memorization ability. And now we are going to discuss about threat internal validity. Internal validity concerns to extent to which a study can accurately measure the relationship between variables. One is history. Unforeseen events may occur during study, influencing the result. And then maturation. So participation may naturally change over time, affecting the outcomes. And it can be selection bias. So the differences between groups may be due to pre-existing characteristics. And the last is regression to the mean. Extreme scores tend to move closer to the average over time. And what is the strength and weakness of exposed factor? For the strength here, useful for investigating real-world phenomena, ethical consideration, and was effective. For the weakness, of course, limited control over variables, difficulty establishing causality, and potential for confounding variable. Okay, and now I'd like to share the example of ex post facto research in
The
some
example of the
article.
article.
Yes, the example of
Yeah.
So I got here 2024, 2024, August, urban governance. So the determinants
Okay.
of housing demand and the residential rent cost in an emerging city in southern Nigeria. Yeah? So we have housing demand and residential rent cost here, X and Y. Yeah. Here the authors, the study attempt to identify the determinant of housing demand and cost of residential rent within city. So in the study, ex post facto and survey design were deployed. Yeah, so there are two research design here applied in this article, ex post facto and survey design. And the data we study, we have questionnaire for the survey, and we have questionnaire administration.
There
And the
are
study
around two
area.
primary and secondary, right?
Yep.
Pak Saiful?
So the data analysis use ANOVA and Sperman-Rong correlation coefficient for the survey and ex post factor here. And the second article, so I got it from proceeding, 2015, influence of socio-economic status and classroom climate on mathematics anxiety of primary school pupils. So there are
Pupils.
three variable here: socio-economic status, classroom climate, mathematics, and anxiety.
Yeah,
So
that's
three
right.
research questions. So three research questions, and three null hypothesis, and then ex post facto is design use, and the sample 103 public primary school, populationnya 12,628 primary, blah, blah, blah. And also the analysis, the technique of analysis use ANOVA. Okay, that's all, Pak. Thank you.
And then the questionnaire, it used cluster, and then there are around three questionnaire that used in that article. Okay. Okay. Thank you for the presentations that we can present today, and then thank you very much for the times, for especially for Professor Munir, and then we need for the suggestions and then corrections, and then also some insightfuls of the this topic, dealing with this topic. Thank you for the questions that given to us. Dan Allah alaikum ajma'in. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi
warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
wabarakatuh.